My name is Evan Navarro. I attend Inderkum High School, and my video is about an IB student here at Inderkum. My video is about exploring the IB program here at Inderkum because we really want to promote our IB program here at Inderkum because it's such a phenomenal worldwide program here. I was the producer, I was the editor, I was the cameraman. I was part of the video too. I was a news reporter. Talking about the IB program, the International Black Baccalaureate program, I really want people to understand if you are able to push yourself to do something out of the boundaries of what's normal and you know you can do it, then I encourage you to pursue it. One last thing I would like to say is that if you are unsure of your future, I believe your best interest is to try and put yourself out there and try to explore new things and see what you can find, because I found biopesmy and I found what I love to do, and I was glad I did.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Vega, better known as Vega, and I'm an IB student at Inderkum High School. Well, at first, my parents forced me to join the IB program, but after being involved and having firsthand experiences in the program, I've realized that it's something that I want to do, and that putting in hard work now in high school will become great outcomes in the future.
So Vega, what are the benefits of you being an IB?
So first of all, one of the benefits of being an IB is that we get the best and most advanced education here at Inderkum. And it's not guaranteed, but you can receive up to about 30 to 40 college credits after high school. And also we use the IB Learner Profiles to help develop ourselves both academically and morally to try and be the best student that we can be.
So, how do you balance homework, social life, and home life as an IB student here at Inderkum?
So personally, that is something that I struggle with myself. But lately, in order to manage my time, I've been trying to organize my assignments as best as possible by making checklists and stuff like that, and setting alerts on my phone, just so that way I'm making sure that I get all my assignments done when I need to, and I make sure to span out my work over the weeks so I'm not trying to get everything done at once. And also, I rely on my parents a lot to help me make sure that I'm getting the important stuff done first, so that way I have time to do what I please. And another thing that I found really helpful with my social and school life is becoming more close with the people that I have classes with, so that way I can have somebody to study with and help me with academic stuff if I need it, and at the same time I'm spending time with my friends.
IB is a rigorous course that challenges students' determination and mindset as they apply all of their learner IB profile traits to the environments of their school life. Vega represents these valuable traits such as communicator, reflective, and caring to develop her sense of character as a person, and most importantly as an IB student here at Inderkum. She's just one of the many students here at Inderkum representing the ideal term of college and career readiness by being in the International Baccalaureate program called IB.
Do you think it is too soon to think about a path for college? Our vision for all Natomas Unified School District students is to graduate college and career ready. Students who are productive, responsible, and engaged global citizens are best prepared for future success. There is a path for all students to follow called the A to G requirements. A to G requirements represent 7 academic subjects that high school students need to take in order to be eligible for direct UC and CSU admission. The A to G requirements offer a high school program that teaches a foundation of skills that will help students apply, analyze, and synthesize complex information. A to G requirements raise the bar for all students to be competitive in today's workforce, whether they go straight into a career or go on to a four-year college. UC and CSU require a certain number of years for each of the 7 A to G subjects. For some of the subjects, additional years are recommended in order to be a competitive applicant. Let's take a look at each category you should be thinking about for your high school planning. The A requirement represents history. 2 years are required, 1 year of U.S. history, and 1 year of social science. The B requirement represents English. 4 years of English are required. 3 years of math are required. We recommend that all students take 4 years of math to be the most competitive. The D requirement represents laboratory science. 2 years of science with a lab class are required, but 3 years of science are recommended. The E requirement represents foreign language. 2 years are required, 3 years are recommended. Also, the language you choose must be the same language for this requirement. If you take 4 years of the same world language, you may be eligible for the California State Seal of Biliteracy. This is a prestigious honor that certifies biliteracy for employers and universities. The F requirement represents visual and performing arts. 1 year of one of these courses are required. And finally, the G requirement represents a college preparatory elective. 1 year is required. To meet the minimum A to G requirements in these college prep classes, you have to get a grade of C or better. Most of the more desired colleges typically require much better than a C grade to be seriously considered. Students who have the best chance of attending the college of their choice or successful career path are the ones who have focused on an educational path from the beginning of middle school. So start thinking early about your A to G requirements. There are also many great resources for questions or ideas on how to reach your college or career goals. If you have any questions about the A to G requirements or would like more information about post-secondary options, feel free to contact Parent University or make an appointment with your counselor. Good luck!
So yeah, we wanted to pick up on some of the things we talked about, step away from the law a little bit, and talk about really what we're suggesting, and a lot of this builds on the roadmap and other materials that are in your book. We were also discussing we're going to make all of this material available digitally, and we're going to continue to add to the materials that we have, because we're going to be talking now about the policies and procedures. Yeah, I sometimes joke that this should be a small p policy, because we've moved outside of the legal and policymaking realm and more into what you need to do in your school or district and the team you need to build to address some of these issues and prepare for success. But it builds on the roadmap that we've got here, and we're going to be developing many more resources that we think will help in your policy building. You'll hear me say this again and again, because I think one big part of it is not only communicating within your school or your district, what are our policies and practices, how do we get everybody on board, but as importantly, how do you share that information with the parents in your community? Because they're the ones who really need to hear it most, and they need to hear it most from all of you, because you're the trusted messengers that they look to for communication and information on technology, safety, privacy, all of these issues and how they all roll together. So this is really just a matter of, how do you get to that goal? This is our core question, and I actually heard some people talking about this. This is really almost the most important question to me. I've worked on kids' privacy and student privacy for several years now, but I've also worked for a long time in education advocacy. There are some really important privacy questions that are coming up. There are also some that are maybe a little bit hyperventilated. There's a mix. You'll hear some really smart questions from parents. You'll hear some concerns in the media that sound maybe that they're not completely on base. It almost doesn't matter, because they all lead to pressure. But what concerns me in the big picture, while I want to make sure student privacy and kid privacy is protected, I also want to make sure we don't let this turn into such a firestorm that it discourages educators from using technology. And frankly, I don't worry about any of you in this room. The fact that you're here shows how vested you are in the importance of technology and in getting the smart responses to this. But colleagues, maybe in your district, maybe in other parts of the state, and I worry about the educators who are least connected to getting legal advice, getting policy advice, getting advice on communicating to parents, and the educators who look at some of these firestorms they see and just figure, this is not worth sticking my neck out. I'm only going to get in trouble. I don't see where the opportunity is. And from my background, I see where the enormous opportunity is to improve instruction and really most of all to personalize learning for kids and bring them better and better tools and resources. And we want to make sure we manage the privacy concerns so that we are making the most out of the technology that's available. So our roadmap really starts with building an e-safety committee. And this is how we said at the beginning, this ties back into, it's not just about privacy, it's about all the parent concerns, it's about all the risks that are involved, and making sure that you're bringing a team together within your school, within your district, so that you're getting all the right inputs and you're getting all the right communication back out. We had a little discussion around here that sometimes this happens where maybe it's just the CTOs or just the tech adopting leaders within a school. And the challenge there is that maybe your teachers aren't getting the full picture, maybe the principal and school board aren't getting the full picture. So everyone needs to be involved in this committee that you'll build.
So maybe I could tag our committee. Remember when we had our stakeholder groups that got engaged once you build a superhighway and a cyber city? Who were those stakeholders? You had our policy leaders, and the policy leader at the school is your principal or the district leaders who's ever managing the digital pipes and the behavior. So then what was next?
Law enforcement.
Law enforcement. So how are you going to enforce? So what type of policies are you going to have? What is the principal going to allow? What is the technology going to be allowed? And then what happens? Education. So when you look at all those stakeholder groups in public health, you want an e-safety committee that includes your technology directors, your principals, your school counselors, because when something goes wrong, guess who's the first person to hear about it? It's not the principal, it's the school counselor. I'm upset, I'm hurt, I don't want the principal to get me in trouble. I want to talk to somebody who's just there for me, and that's the school counselor. You also want to gather your information literacy experts. So if you're lucky enough to have a teacher librarian, you want your teacher librarian. If you don't have one, you want to make sure somebody with media literacy background is on that committee because they have such a good grasp of how you teach the concepts in everyday life. You've got your technology directors and technology literacy, so it's going to be your ISTE folks. It's all how you get in and communicate and collaborate. You want those components. Then you also want someone that you know in law enforcement that you can talk to and have a confidential conversation when something comes up. Because the best time to have a good relationship with law enforcement is before they have to show up because of some digital reason. So if you include occasionally your contact with your local law enforcement who's going to manage digital evidence or a digital situation, it makes your life so much easier. And then, yes,
Can you give an example of when law enforcement
yeah.
would be involved in digital?
Okay, so I was in a school district in Maryland, and their laws around harassment are a little bit different than, every state is a little bit different. So at this school, they were having a big issue with some cyberbullying, and it was pretty nasty. And and this is a good time for me to tell you that everything you know about teaching kids to be nice to each other offline is the same with two exceptions. So like 98% is the same, but we're going to add two things, and research shows this over and over. In the digital space, kids will do in front of a screen what they would never do in this room. And they will take a picture of a place they would never expose in a room full of people. They will in their own bedroom with a device. And it's because something is disinhibiting. It also means they'll say something more cruel than they ever would have before. So you've got the fact that it's disinhibiting. The other thing that makes it different is that it's permanent. It can be digitized and replicated. So before, if you get upset and angry, you might blow off some steam and say some terrible thing. But with a disinhibited moment, you might actually go a step further than that. And because the digital communication is going to continue, what used to be a bullying situation or a difficult situation right here between the two of us, only the people right around saw, or maybe everyone in this room, or maybe we heard about it in other rooms. But now it can happen, she can capture this interaction, and now the entire communicated global superhighways of the digital cities have access. So it means that we have to deal with educators with emotional things that we didn't before. So back to law enforcement. Actually, I'm coming back there. So with law enforcement, this school had they had a friend who worked with their Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, and they called them up and said, man, we're just having this big issue. I cannot get to the root of it. And it just keeps, you know, what happens in school shows up online. What happens online, you have to deal with on campus. So his friend said, okay, great. You know, they get a little warrant. They find out the IP addresses. And then within, you know, less than 24 hours, the principal who thought maybe 4 individuals were involved, law enforcement, you know, they can't tell you specific details about a case, but if they trust you and you trust them, they can say, you know, I know you're working with 4 students, but you might go a little bit broader than that. And they can just give you that look where you kind of think, well, maybe I should be talking to at least 12. So what happened is then the principal has the information that she needs. She's able to talk to some of the students and say, you know what, I know that it's happening with IP addresses with a whole bunch of students here. So since we, you know, what you do online can be tracked, and we know the ISPs, they know all the locations where this is happening. So do you want to tell us about it? Blah, 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 blah. It all comes out, and then the whole thing's resolved so much faster, where before for weeks it was bubbling. So with law enforcement, when there's something really serious, when you need something pulled down, like a fight video or some humiliating something or some teacher, you know, whatever, if you have access to law enforcement with the law, with a warrant, they can give you information and they can provide you access to the industry that you don't have on your own. They have the phone numbers. So they know who to call at Facebook if there's some threatening image or some child's about to commit suicide. And if the law enforcement calls them, they are pretty quick to respond. Yeah,
in response to cyber exploitation issues, Facebook, Google, others have made their takedown process much simpler, easier to find on their websites, and they're much more responsive. You used to argue with them to get them to take down a lot of images of cyberbullying. I think a lot of them...
Revenge porn.
Yes. It started off... cyber exploitation, revenge porn was sort of the focus, but I think it will also be extending to bullying images.
So it follows that same,
easier.
you hook them together, and the first, you know, you get cybercrime exploitation, and so the initial support comes from policy leaders, but they actually, law enforcement has the capacity to know the IP addresses of where it's happening, gather information, and then communicate also with the company. They've got the phone numbers. So that is where...
And we're always careful to be aware of the balance that you need to strike locally. You know, we're not trying to criminalize education technology.
Oh,
but
there, yeah.
The police, your local police, especially, you have relations, or if you don't, you should build them. We work with a lot of great police officers who are doing community policing, and they can be really helpful ambassadors to your schools, especially middle school and high school. They can say things to your students that sound a little different coming from them, and help get people to pay a little more attention. And they're the ones that we've been working with, some folks down in Hawthorne PD and around LA Airport, that are very savvy about the best ways to message this to kids. That doesn't make it, we don't want this to be, hey, you know, stay offline or you're all going to get killed. That will not be heard. But police officers have a very special role in their community, and they can be a really helpful preventive as you start thinking about your e-safety approaches.
Yeah, it's that 2 pieces. You've got to have, you know, manage risk, and that's where law enforcement fits in. They're not going to teach your kids how to thrive. That's where they're going to get that from you. But there is that combination.
Yep. All right. So Marcely talked about these earlier. These are really kind of the key components that we think are just essential to be building. Privacy fits into them, but we look at all of this from a digital citizenship perspective, and we're going to come back to that, talking about the Berkman curriculum and materials specifically for kids. But it really is about looking at all of these issues and how you educate your kids and your colleagues about the smartest way to approach balance and ethics and all the different components that are part of building an environment where you get to use the best of technology, you get to optimize the education technology, but you get to manage the risks and prepare for things that can go wrong. This is largely about making, you know, sooner or later, we'll deal with the incident response piece in a moment, but no matter how much you prepare, something probably will go wrong. These are kids we're talking about.
So we took the list of all the things that can go wrong, and then we worked with Harvard's public health department, so that we could address them with evergreen positive action items. Because people change behavior when they see vision and they hear the message from someone they know and trust. When I go to the pediatrician, I don't want to hear all the way my child can die and all the diseases. So when you talk to students and parents, cybercrime, identity theft, sexting, sextortion, you know, blah, 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 blah. Cholera, typhoid, malaria, you know, it just goes in that, you know, okay, yeah, that sounds, you know, Ebola. So when you want people to live, then you teach them how to put their kids to bed at night with a story, and how to eat dinner together, and put a seatbelt on, and a helmet. These are those 6 core, and they're evergreen. So regardless if it's a Fitbit or if it's a whatever the technology, it was frustrating for me to feel like every time there was a new device, I had to have a whole new set of skills to figure it out and manage it. But it's not. If you look, remember how we have 4 points of access to the web, you know, between the location, the network, the device, and the application? These are the human skills and competencies that we need to absolutely thrive. And it's off of research-backed, what we know for sure is happening, not just what shows up in the media. So these skills and competencies need to find their way into every possible curriculum concept, modeling, you know, these are the core ones.
And one of the core challenges that we talk about a lot in terms of this rubric and digital citizenship as a whole, especially with parents, is that if you really had to boil these down, Marcely touched on this earlier, this is about being kind. This is about the golden rule. These aren't that complex at the end of the day, especially in terms of what you want to teach kids. We want to teach them to be nice to each other and respectful and smart. In fact, one of the things that I fixate on, especially with different ages of kids, is whether safety is a word that isn't going to resonate. I think as kids get a little bit older, safety is sometimes something that they're like, you're always warning me about that. But being smart online, I think, resonates for kids of all ages. So the challenge there is that as adults, we know what the rules are. You know, be kind, be nice, treat other people the way you'd like to be treated. But especially with parents, probably less so with you all, we often don't understand how the tools work. The kids understand the tools, the adults understand the rules, and that's where you're trying to meet in the middle. It's challenging for a lot of parents to say, okay, here's how I want you to behave on Facebook. Well, like, we're not on Facebook anymore. We're on Snapchat. Oh, great, I don't know how that works. And you're caught in the middle, but this is another area in which you're somewhat the ambassadors in this space, because you do know more about the tools than a lot of your parents, and you can help them bridge the gap as well.
Okay, here's where it plays out. So this is a true story, and it's about privacy, and this is when you don't have an e-safety committee with somebody on your privacy, in your e-safety committee, you need one person to wear the privacy hat, meaning they're not a privacy expert, but they're willing to find the answers. So this happened in a school. This very excited, enthusiastic teacher thought, I want the kids to feel the personal responsibility about using over-the-counter drugs and prescriptions responsibly. So I'm going to have them go and list down all of the medicine in the medicine cabinet. Thank you. That is the appropriate side. You already are all privacy people. So, okay. So the end of the story is, yes, it did happen, and now you add digital world, and you've got a PR, you've got the news, you've got so many privacy violations, you can't even begin to start. But she didn't mean to violate privacy. She was trying to make the experience real in the teaching environment. And when we look at the big privacy problems, it's usually something like that, or it's a mistake. And I won't call it out. In one of the states, we recently saw someone's, what do you call it here with the IEP, or, you know, somebody who's having some big struggles, and he's trying to get through high school, and somehow, just by mistake, it got included with something that then was digitized, and the entire Google search, you know, all the search engines will now forevermore find that student's personalized plan. The rest of his life, you cannot pull that stuff down. So anyway, the stakes are high. The opportunities are huge, but the stakes are high. And usually when there's something that goes wrong like that, it's just a mistake. It's not malicious. So it's just like, oh. Anyway, this did happen. Privacy lead on your e-safety committee. And this is the reactionary, that sometimes we're just always feeling that react, react, react. And we can't feel proactive. The next slide is the proactive. You can't feel that until you really have a roadmap. And you're on that roadmap with your curriculum team, with your technology director, with your principal, and how they're going to discipline, so there's some consistency. When you see how one district will discipline this similar situation, another one, and then a parent's upset, and then there's a civil case, and now everybody goes to court, and you know, these consistencies where you have the roadmap, it makes such a difference. And we could see that there was nothing like that for K through 12. So we worked with Professor Solov from George Washington University, and I said, okay, Dan, nobody's doing K through 12. Like, there's no money in K through 12. I don't mean that like personally, but when you consider I think it's the bikinis are $11 billion business, or swimming suits are, I think, are $11 billion, and education is $8 billion. So $8 billion to me is so much money I can't imagine, but then, you know, anyway, in context. So Professor Sola put together the first K, and then we ran it through several other privacy experts, K through 12, where are all the places you need to think about privacy? And what does that look like? What are the laws? And that is in your packet. It's called, and it's free for schools. It's the roadmap, privacy roadmap for schools. And then after we got the roadmap, we went, okay, now we don't have anything for teaching comprehensive privacy skills to kindergartners, first grade, second grade, but they're all on. So also in your book is a curriculum matrix of privacy skills. So if you get that to your curriculum team, they just know how to put that in everywhere. You know, they know what to do with that. Okay, so, and there it is.
Look at the roadmap, which you have. And it goes into the details of, you know, this is part of what you need to be exploring, and we touched on this a little bit earlier in the detailed conversation about SOPIPA. It's like, how do you know whether it's the software you're contracting, a cloud service you're contracting, or apps that your teachers are using? How do you figure out what's being collected, where's it going, who's sharing it? And especially in an environment, I think most of you are familiar with this, we've built, I say we as a society, have built an ecosystem in which data is just super widely shared. It funds a lot of the free content or lower priced content that we get. And that has created an environment where it's very hard to determine how far data is shared or how to put limits on how that data is shared. That's how the whole app economy has been built. And so that, it's not surprising. And I think we were discussing over here that we've heard a lot of parents in Silicon Valley who are maybe even more worried about student data privacy because they work in the industry and they're even more aware about how broadly data is being shared. And these are just the real challenges that you have to address, partly by looking at the contracts that we talked about before. We'll dig into the badges in more detail. And then I do think we're going to come back to this in several places, how you address this with parents, because I think that is a core issue as well. How you make sure they know what you're doing and why, and how you're protecting data, and how you're teaching kids about data. More to add on that? This, of course, is one of the big challenges. And when we were talking earlier about, you know, whether you have a cloud service or whether you just keep it in your own district, some of the educators we talked to in Southern California earlier this year, all CTOs in this one meeting that we had where everybody was like, it's all anonymous, anybody can say whatever they want. And one of their concerns about not just California's laws, but a lot of the new state laws that are going to make it, they would argue, going to make it harder to use a cloud service. And the CTOs were telling us, it's like, every district system that we've built is far less secure than the cloud services that we can rent. The challenge there, of course, going back to those Silicon Valley parents, is Google Cloud services and others are more secure, except that they involve a lot of sharing within the Google ecosystem. So that may be one of the things that your parents are worried about. It's interesting on a national level to talk to people about student data privacy and to get a temperature of where they're coming from politically. I already mentioned that sometimes this is a proxy war for Common Core or standardized testing. I grew up in Berkeley, California. I lived in Virginia, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. So I've got a pretty good beat on where different parts of the political spectrum may lie. And it's interesting that some of the privacy concerns are far right and some are far left. Some parents are worried about President Obama stealing their kids' data, and some parents are worried about Scholastic stealing their kids' data. This comes from all directions, and the cloud is one of the things that, while it brings enormous opportunities to use and share data effectively, it raises some concerns that you are now kind of on the forefront of addressing. But this is the other part of the, you know, how do you address with your companies that you contract with the apps that you're bringing in, and really just clicking, how far is that data going, and what can you do about it? And this is another part of the equation. Because this is, somebody made this point really interesting, partly at the Q conference, but also at the SIAA conference that I went to earlier in June. It's like the ecosystem for data writ large is don't ever throw it out. It's always going to be valuable. And you have this, maybe if you have Gmail, you're like, oh, that email to somebody that I deleted a year and a half ago, it's still there, which is great because I can go find it and I can figure out what their address is and get back to it. So the overall data ecosystem was built to hold on to data for as long as possible. But a lot of privacy experts will tell you, even before you get into the education space, that's dangerous because the more data you have, the more ripe you are for a hack or any other kind of attack. And in the education space especially, there's more of an interest in limiting the amount of data, or at least in throwing it out after a certain period of time. But there have been state legislative proposals to, I can't remember who was talking about this at Q, but there have been proposals to limit the amount of student data you could keep to 3 years. Where's the challenge there? Where's the high school transcript? So we've got to find a way to communicate what the most effective way is to protect while not necessarily disposing of data that we do need over time. I mean, one of the challenges to me, I worked in early childhood education and in education advocacy before data was really becoming a question. And one of the root challenges that doesn't really come up in the debates is that, for example, people who are worried about too much standardized testing often attach to privacy as an issue because that's one of the reasons they're worried about the data. But early educators will tell you that the improvements that we're making in personalized learning create the opportunity to develop portfolios about students that are much more rich and much more informative than any kind of letter grade ever could have been about a first or second grader. But you can't have that personalized learning profile without personalized learning and data. So it's a matter of how we balance all of this. I've said already a few times, and I will say quite a few more, that this is really a lot about not just what you do, but how you communicate what you do. And I think we're going to touch later. One of the requirements already under FERPA is that once a year, your school is supposed to send a notice out to parents explaining what your privacy practices are and what their rights and opportunities are. I've talked to a lot of educators, even in the last year, who are like, we don't do that. And I know it feels like a burden, but I'd switch the table on you and tell you it's a real opportunity. Especially in this day and age when you are adopting new technologies and trying new apps and services that I believe, and I think most of you believe, can really help improve learning experiences for kids, that's something you want to be bragging about. And that's the way you want to be talking to parents about it. And privacy is a big part of that conversation. But Craig in Santa Clara, who we worked with to put one of these workshops together in the first place, his point in our first discussion about building the workshop was, if personalized learning isn't the beginning of your conversation about privacy, then you're starting on the wrong foot. When you're talking with parents, you need to be telling them the why and the how of the technology you're using. And then you need to be very clear and consistent about what that means in terms of data and how you're also building protections to make sure that data doesn't go where it's not supposed to go. And for example, that it's not going to be used for commercial purposes. And tying in the California laws is an important part of this right now because those are helpful to you. I mean, SOPIPA, we didn't touch about this earlier, but SOPIPA in a very short format basically reverse engineers FERPA and applies it to companies. That's, again, non-legal, way too shorthand, but it's the smartest thing about the law in my eyes because one of the challenges with FERPA all along is that it says to schools, you can't do X, Y, or Z or you'll get in trouble. How many schools have ever gotten in trouble with FERPA? 0. Because the federal government, the Department of Education, has one sanction for FERPA, which is to cut funding to a school that violates its FERPA obligations. The Department of Education doesn't like to get in the habit of cutting funding to schools. So in 40 years, they have not done anything. They now have a privacy office, and they're trying to help educators get smarter about what their FERPA obligations are. But the law itself is not well built in that regard because the police don't want to sanction a school that's done something wrong. So PIPA is smarter, and I would argue probably more helpful for you because it puts the spotlight on the companies and the products and the apps and says, thou shalt not do this. And then it positions the Attorney General's office or others to say, here are the companies that are behaving badly. So another sidetrack on FERPA. But the key elements of this, not only to be able to talk about your protective policies, but to really be proactive about what all of your staff need to know, what everyone within the school system needs to know, and we're going to touch on, as importantly, about what students need to know. Because as we've already discussed, in privacy and in all of these digital risk areas, they're often the most important players. You know, you can have an app that gives away too much data, you can have a breach in your system, but you also have students who might be the ones sharing the most information in the first place and putting their own reputations and positions at risk.
And you're still here and still thinking, so it's some questions. We're going to practice, so our next activities, you're actually going to get into groups and review and make some decisions. So now's a good time to throw out questions, particularly while we've got Joan here.
We can go back to the California stuff, because we are losing her in a minute.
Yes.
The other piece we're going to touch on during the break, is, and you've got this material in there, it's the stuff marked draft, is from the Berkman Center at Harvard University. And we've been working with them in kind of parallel tracks. Our main focus is tools for you, people in the school settings at all levels. Berkman's focus is K-12 students. So the materials they've got there, which again are still in a draft form, and we'll look at some of the examples, are designed to help you and counselors and others teach students about protecting their own information, while at the same time respecting that students want to share information. I mean, one of the issues we talk about in the digital reputation space is to make sure that we're not saying to kids, lock down everything they do. Because today's students you want them to have positive and valuable information about themselves online. And you want to teach them to share valuable things about their colleagues and their fellow students. Because if they apply to college and they don't have any online presence at all, that may be a knock against them. Maybe not as bad as if they have a very negative online presence, but you want them to be able to brag about the great stuff they're doing in school, in music, extracurriculars, sports. And so teaching them, helping them learn how to do that in smart ways is another really important part of the equation.
Do any of you use I think it's a model framework on library standards that's about digital citizenship? That's it was developed by an advisory committee to the Department of Ed at California. Have you seen that? It's grade level by grade level what the kids should learn, and it's everything from how to use technology to how to use it, responsibly, safely, respectfully, kindly, and all of that. And it would be interesting to see how
it lines up. We lined it up
Okay,
with
good.
California's. It's the model school library standards that were enacted a couple of years ago, and we actually tagged our curriculum.
If you guys don't know about that, look at it.
It's well thought out.
Yeah.
It's really through the lens of information literacy.
Yeah.
So what do you need to know about these pieces of information moving around and around, and where do we fit in?
And if we didn't mention it, librarians and media specialists are another key component for your e-safety team, because we work with a lot of librarians, and they're constantly pointing out that their space is often one of the most attractive in a well-prepared school, because as our friend Glenn Warren down in Southern California likes to put it, he's like, every other classroom, the students walk in and they're here to do something that's assigned. When they walk into my media room, they're there to create something. They're there to kind of follow their own star and decide what they're going to do. So I've been into library spaces with him, and it is amazing to watch how excited the kids are to be there. And that's why the librarian and media specialist, as he also points out, we have far too few of them, but where we have them, they can be a really valuable asset. And to touch on Marcelly's point about digital literacy, that's a key component of this as well. We tend to focus on the digital citizenship part in these discussions in terms of be nice to your neighbor and don't overshare and be smart. But digital literacy is fundamental to that and goes back to the origins of media literacy. The more we help students learn that all these great things they are accessing online were created by someone, and that they are also creating things and putting them online, that's a circle of information that helps them really get it. And we recently developed more material around creativity and copyright to help students learn To me, the argument really begins with their own creativity. When you help them understand that they create things and they want others to appreciate what they created, it helps them reflect on the fact that they should respect other creators, whether one of their classmates or somebody in Hollywood, and helps them understand where the appropriate level of sharing is, and then you can teach them about fair use in an educational setting in a more meaningful way.